Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala khatimi nabiyyin. Wal imam al-mursaleen. Habibina wa nabiyyina Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Before we even talk about the main subject, I must say something. I find it much easier to turn and look on my right than my left, because on the left I have to turn all the way up to here. It's like a lighthouse. I have no objection. If you're sitting, inshallah, just sit over there. But I'll mention this one more time. From the etiquettes of seeking knowledge is you come close and sit in front of the teacher. The reason for that is there are multiple benefits. First and foremost, if you have a question, you raise your hand, sitting in front of the teacher, who do you think he's going to see? He's going to see you. Second thing, if he asks a question, you have the opportunity to answer first because you're sitting in front of the teacher. Number three, if he speaks or his voice goes up and down, the mic cuts out, he coughs or sneezes, you will catch what he's saying. The guy behind you won't. So there's benefits in sitting, coming in close. Number four, you can observe his manners, his clothing, the way he addresses, the way he thinks, and his mannerisms. Many times, I'm not talking about myself, many times teachers, just by their mannerisms, are exceptional. They're like an institution, a university by themselves. So if you come sitting close, you can observe these things. So there are much advantages in coming close and sitting. So inshallah, if you can try to do that, you'll always see me, especially when anybody else is speaking here. I try to come and sit in the front. The only time I don't is when Kahari says move away. Otherwise, I'll try to come and sit in the front because it's much easier for me. Also, I found that as a student, I always was a front bencher, never the back bencher, because when I was in the second or third row, always have an issue. Someone is moving their head, scratching their head, shifting their chair, and my attention goes to that person while the teacher is speaking. So that's the reason I always want to sit in the first chair. Not just in that, in Salah, I hate anything but Saful Awwal because of this reason, especially in the Taraweeh. Because in Taraweeh, in order for me to focus, I need nobody in front of me. So I make a point, inshallah, to come and sit as close to the lecturer, the teacher, and behind the imam as I possibly can. And I advise you all to do the same. Today's lecture, the topic I gave was Al-Qabr, the grave life. It's, as you can tell, it's a play on words here because it's the life of the grave, but also the word grave means what? Serious. It's a serious issue to discuss. And even though we're going to discuss it today, I'll tell you something else. Life in the grave for a mu'min or mu'minah is very easy. No exaggeration. Except the first few moments which are petrifying. Beyond that, it's very easy. I'm not going to say it's fulfilling because it's still a temporary home. Let's talk about homes. Any of my brothers and sisters here, I'm not going to talk about those who are teenagers. Any of my elders here, they've lived in one home for a period 20 years or more. I have not had the opportunity in my life, but any of my elders, did you do that in your life? You grew up or lived in one home only for 20 years straight. MashaAllah. Okay, 1, 2, 4, at least 4 people that I can see. Alhamdulillah, that is a ni'mah, I can tell you this much. And this was very common throughout human history. Only the past 60, 70, 100 years, actually the period after World War II onwards, is when globalization became so widespread that people started moving around en masse. And even right now, as you can tell, even in the same city, people frequently move and change homes. My uncle, my mother's extended cousin who lives here, he's lived in Houston since 2002, and he's changed homes 11 times. So sometimes he had to change twice in 1 year for this reason or that. It's not that uncommon actually changing homes. It happens quite frequently. But think about this. How many of you, when you're about to go to this latest home where you live, before you entered or before you bought the home, before you rented the home, did you go and check it out or not? Tell me this.
Yes.
You did, right? Why? Just give me a brief idea. Why did you do that?
To see if I like it.
Good. To see that you like it. What else would be a reason to go check out your home? Pardon me? Someone says something. You can just speak up. To check the neighborhood. Very important point. You want to see who we're going to sit next, what do you call that? Live next to. Whether they're rowdy or whether they're quiet people. Whether it's a safe neighborhood or it's renowned to be a place where it's quite unsafe, insecure. What other reasons could be where you want to go and check out the house before you move into it? Come on, the reasons are obvious. You tell me. You want to see whether you like the paint, whether the location of the drawing room is where you want, whether the bedroom is large or small, whether it has enough bathrooms. There are multiple reasons. To live in a home where you won't perhaps live 20 years? All that effort? I ask you, not just sisters, brothers, in fact, have you not spent, be honest, at least 30 minutes, at least once in your life, you spent 30 minutes looking to buy one hat on Amazon, one pair of socks, a pair of shoes. Researched this and that, looked through 50 different things, and then selected one. Have you ever considered the fact when we get buried, we have no choice on what we wear? One of the family members will wrap us up literally in a bed sheet. The grave that we enter, we won't get the opportunity to check it out. And that's the place we live, Allah knows, eons, until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. The grave is a home, much longer stay than any home that we live on earth. But it's one home on which we have little to no say. If you have a capacity, the opportunity to make a selection for a grave, I want to buy this plot, alhamdulillah, you are one of few lucky people. Majority mankind, one more reason, because of how frequently we move and relocate, there is actually not great benefit either to do that. Unless you're, mashallah, retired, settled in a home, you know you have no plans to leave this home, mashallah, you're wealthy enough that you know you will not have to sell the house or be kicked out of it. You can stay in there. Then you can select a plot 20 yards, 200 meters, a couple miles down the road in your favorite graveyard, and then you make plot selection. Many of us, or majority of us, will not have that luxury. We cannot guarantee where we live or die for that matter. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the life of this world. And yet, Al-Qabr, the amount of ayat and ahadith talking about is, are a lot more than not talking about the life of this world, or the houses that you live in, or the clothes that you wear. Do you know why that is the case? It's amazing. People, indeed, they get so confused about matters, what will happen in the grave. And they come asking questions. Is there punishment in the grave real? Is there fire inside the grave? Are there poisonous snakes? Are there, insects inside the grave? Does a person feel pain once they're dead? It really surprises me because the number of ayat and ahadith talking about the grave are too numerous to count. All of them sahih. Which gives me one idea about this matter. The Prophet ﷺ did not spare any details on this matter. He told everything about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that the ummah of Muhammad knows fully well what will happen to them after they die. Especially after they get buried. In stupendous detail. For one reason only. Before you enter, while you're walking, get ready. Last time, 2 weeks ago, we had the luxury, alhamdulillah, of attending or talking about the idea of death itself. The thing that cuts off life itself. Today we will talk about what happens after death. And specifically the idea of once we get buried. So today we're not going to talk about janazah, shrouding. We're not going to talk about the mayyit being bathed or showered or cleaned or washed. No, we're just going to talk about qabr itself. The qabr is very interesting. When the janazah is taken or the person is laid down, when people start piling mud, the question arises, when do the angels come? There's a famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, when the Sahaba were burying one of their fellow Sahaba, and before they even left, the Prophet ﷺ told them, start making dua for your companion because he is being questioned right now. Which tells you something. Literally, when the mud is laid and the qabr as such is set, whatever capacity you call to be set, question begins in the grave. So question in the grave is something which is very, very well known. But that's not the first event. Can anyone tell me what is the first thing that a person experiences once they're laid inside their grave? What do you think is the first thing that will happen to your body once you enter your grave? Tell me.
The grave will hug you.
The grave will squeeze you. Jazakallah khair. That's the first thing. The squeezing the grave is very interesting. The Prophet ﷺ told about this. He said, indeed there is a pressing in the grave that occurs in the grave. If anyone could be saved from it, it would have been Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. This hadith tells us two things for sure and one thing about which we have some doubt. Can anyone tell me two things that we are sure about from based on this hadith?
No one is saved from that.
No one is safe from the first thing. Everyone will go through it. What's the second thing? It's actually towards the end. Tells you about the lofty status of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, right? Because the Prophet is talking about a Sahabi, not even a Nabi, but he says a Sahabi. He's so noble, he's so worthwhile, he's so precious in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah would have spared anybody from this, it would have been this man. You know, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, there's so many different hadith talking about his virtue. Famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, the arsh of Allah Azza wa Jal shook upon the death of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Hadith Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. Another famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ came wearing a very soft thobe made of, very similar to silk. Not silk, but very soft like silk. So the Sahaba came and yalmisuna, they started touching it and they started looking at it with wonderment and amazement. And they said, they're so soft. So the Prophet ﷺ said, are you amazed about the softness of this? The handkerchiefs of Sa'ad and Mu'adh are softer and more luxurious than this in Jannah. So he also mentioned Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh in this matter. So the Sahabi, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, has a lot of virtue. And one of the things from we learn is this, that even he, radiallahu anhu, was not spared from the squeezing of the grave. What is the squeezing the grave? We know from a separate hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, when a person is lowered in their graves and their family leaves, the grave squeezes them. For a mu'min, it lets go. But for a kafir or a fasiq, the squeezing continues until their ribs interlocked with each other. So the adhab of Qabr begins from the very beginning for a kafir or a fasiq, a disbeliever or an evil Muslim. But what about the mu'min or righteous person? The scholars debated on this matter, and we come to this hadith now. Come back to the hadith of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. One thing about which we're not exactly sure. The Prophet ﷺ said, if there was anyone saved from it, it would have been Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Does the hadith say that if any, he would be saved from the punishment of it, or the pain of it, or the suffering of it? No. The hadith does not clarify that the squeezing the grave is painful or torturous. It just says it squeezes. Based on this hadith and the fact that the mu'minun will not be punished at all because Allah has wiped the records clean, the scholars debate on this matter. Some said no, even a mu'min or a mu'mina will feel some degree of discomfort. But as the hadith says, the grave will let go of them. The other scholars said no, the squeezing the grave is like the hug of a mother. Tight and embracing, but it's let go. It's not painful. Fact of the matter is, we do not know. The only time we'll know is when it happens. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us. Whatever it is. But there is a squeeze of the grave for sure, that much we know. Is it painful for mu'min or mu'minah? That we do not know. Some of the scholars debated, took this point further. They said, why do you think that happens? Obviously, there's no why here. The Prophet ﷺ informed us about it. It's a matter of aqeedah, we believe it. But they speculated on this matter. They guessed. And some of them gave a very nice expression. They said, we were created from this earth. When we go back to it, the earth embraces us because we have been returned back to where we came from. That's why it squeezes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. It's a nice explanation, but there's nothing that confirms that for us. There is for sure the fitna of the grave. And that is fitna from which, as much as we know, nobody is saved, except there are some exceptions. We'll talk about exceptions later. Let's start with the fitna itself. What is the fitna? The questioning of the angels. We mentioned the hadith before. While the Sahaba had just buried one of their companions, the Prophet ﷺ told them, make dua for your brother because he's being questioned right now. Yani, first thing is squeezing and the second thing is questioning. It happens around the time people are still there. If you want to argue in modern times, by the time you leave your parking lot, maybe the questioning is finished for the person who's just buried. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make things easy for us when we are questioned, because famously, can anyone tell me what are the questions being asked and in the sequence they're asked? I'm sure most of you have known this hadith by now, inshallah. So can one of you venture, can a brave soul raise their hand, inshallah, and tell me what are the questions and the sequence they're asked? Yes, my dear sister, go ahead. Good. Who's your Lord? Can you speak up? What's your religion? Good. And then? And who's your Nabi? Jazakallah khairan. That's exactly in this order the angels will ask question. Who are the angels? Let's talk about that in a second. The hadith itself that we're talking about, excuse me. You have to excuse me, inshallah. I'm going to have to do this, inshallah, in order to avoid blowing out your ears. According to the hadith narrated by Al-Bara ibn Azib, radiallahu anhu, the Messenger of Allah alayhi said, two very harsh-looking angels come to him, the person is buried, and make him sit up. They say to him, who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? This is the last trial the believer is subjected to. So the Prophet ﷺ confirmed for us, beyond this, for a mu'min or a mu'minah, there's nothing further. Nothing further in the grave. In Yawm al-Qiyamah, there's a different issue. This is what Allah refers to in the verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ وَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ الظَّالِمِينَ وَيَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Excuse me. So he says, my Lord is Allah. Yes, go ahead. Jazakallah khair. So kind of you. I actually have them here, but I appreciate this very much. My Lord is Allah. My religion is Islam, and my prophet is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then a voice cries out from the heaven, my slave has spoken the truth, and he said concerning Kafir, or the evildoer. Yani the Prophet ﷺ said so. Two very harsh angels come to him and treat him roughly and make him sit up. Then they say to him, who's your Lord? He says, I don't know. Then he's asked, what is your religion? He says, I don't know. Then he's asked, who's your prophet? And he says, I don't know. Yes, this is something more appreciated. I appreciate this so much. Jazakallah khairan. He cannot even remember the name of the person. So they tell him the name of the person looking for is Muhammad. Yani the Nabi is Muhammad alayhi salam. Then the voice calls out, my slave is a liar, or my slave has lied, and he is punished. This hadith is is a Sahih hadith. There's another hadith in Jami' at-Tirmidhi, similar wording, also long one. Bear with me. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam said, when the deceased or one of you is buried, there comes to him two black and blue angels. One of them is called Al-Munkar, the second is called Al-Nakir. They ask him, what did you say about this man, i.e. Muhammad alayhi salam? And they said, he is the slave of Allah and his messenger. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I bear witness there is no God but Allah, and then Muhammad is a slave and his messenger. They say, we knew that you would say that. Then his grave is made spacious for him. 70 cubits by 70. What is a cubit? This is a cubit, right? Am I remembering correctly? From the top of to the elbow, right? This is a cubit. So 70 this way, 70 this way, 70 this way, 70 that way. It's made wide for him. In other words, it's no more constricting and restricted anymore. By the way, human nature, no matter how much you claim this, every human being is slightly claustrophobic. Everyone hates to be confined. There are those who start hyperventilating and those who can remain calm, but everyone dislikes to be constricted. That's why this is a ni'mah. The grave becomes wide for that person in all directions. Excuse me. Another thing all human beings dislike completely, darkness. Except when you're about to go to sleep, or when you don't want to wake up in the morning, your parents are waking up, you want the room to be brightly lit. No one likes to be in darkness. The grave is what? Is made bright for that person. It's illuminated. Then it is said to him, sleep. And he says, may I go back to my family? Tell them. They said, no. Sleep like a bridegroom who will be woken up by none other than the dears of his family to him. You will only understand this portion of this hadith, especially the young brothers, the day you get married. Before that, you will not understand this portion of the hadith. They say, sleep like the bridegroom who will be woken by none other than the dearest of his family to him, yani his newlywed wife, until Allah raises him from that resting place of his. But if he's a hypocrite, yani if he's a munafiq, he says, I heard the people say something, so I said something like what they used to say. And then the angel said, we knew you were about to say this. Then it said to the earth, squeeze him. So it squeezes him until his ribs interlock, and he will continue to be tormented therein until Allah raises him from that resting place. This hadith is sahih, but the events in this hadith are slightly changed. This hadith does not mention that the mu'min or mu'min are squeezed, and it says that the kafir, or the hypocrite in this case, munafiq, he will be punished by squeezing grave after, by the commandment of the angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The sequence of events, most scholars say, is the squeeze comes first, then the questioning. Comment about Al-Munkar wa Nakir. The hadith says they are black and blue. The scholars debated about this matter. Why black and blue? Because, let's be honest, black figures are inherently scary. That's why when people are afraid of dark spaces, kids are afraid of shadows. Because anything that moves, any apparition, any silhouette which is dark, causes people a degree of anxiety and frightfulness. And therefore, Al-Munkar wa Nakir are two angels that are exceedingly, I'm sorry about that. I did not notice that. But it says black and blue, so you're saved, inshallah. Very good point, by the way. The scholars debated. They said, Al-Munkar is black and Nakir is blue. The other said, no, both of them are black and blue. The third group says, no, all of them are black and their eyes are blue. Whatever the case is, one thing we know for sure. When a person is shaken up or jolted up and woken up, made to sit up in the grave and ask questions, no one will be happy and confirm, Alhamdulillah, how are you doing? Assalamu alaikum. Great to see you both. Everyone will be petrified and terrified. The horror only continues and builds further and further for those who are irreligious or people who are of sin. As for people who are righteous and piety, inshallah, after this, as the hadith confirms, they will not be tortured beyond this in the grave. Is the questioning limited to believers and to this ummah? Many scholars talked about this. Al-Imam ibn Abdul Barr, As-Suyuti, and a lot of other great ulama said, this is only for al-mu'minun and only for the ummah Muhammad. Everybody else, they'll be suffering in the grave. There's no questioning for this. But we just read the hadith that are clearly sahih, and they indicate that no, disbeliever or believer, everyone will be questioned in the grave. Okay. What about those who drown in the sea? How many of you have heard about boats and ships capsizing, even this day and age? How about people who die in submarines when they go down in the middle of the ocean? Like the Ocean Gate fiasco that happened last year famously. You know, I have a comment about this to make. In New York Times, they mentioned that 5 very rich people died and it became a worldwide search for them. 3 days after those 5 people were crushed to death in that Ocean Gate fiasco, if you don't know about it, just go check over there. A boat going from Africa to Italy capsized. 45 Africans died. Not a single news network reported that one. And they said, this tells you what is the value of a person, how much they have in their bank account. This is an article in New York Times, by the way. It really is so profound, isn't it? Anyway, the scholars said a person, when they die, their grave is in the ocean. As for someone who's eaten by animals, killed and eaten, their questioning will be inside the belly of the animal. Does the animal hear it? We do not know. No animal has come report us anything about that. But that's how scholars commented about this, because the grave is where? Nowhere else, inside the belly of the animal itself. Will the prophets be asked these questions? Come on, are you going to tell me there's an angel is going to ask Rasulullah, who's your Nabi? Obviously not. Imam Ahmad answered this question. They said, yes, the prophets are also asked, except one question they're not asked. Who is their Nabi? Because they themselves are Al-Anbiya. One more thing about prophets, which is completely unique to them. Multiple times the Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah has forbidden the earth to consume the bodies of Al-Anbiya. We know from a very famous hadith how many Anbiya Allah SWT sent on this earth. Any remembers that? Famous hadith says 124,000 Anbiya and 317 Rusul. Shaykh Walid and quite a few other scholars said there's a hadith, this hadith, by the way, famous though it is, there's actually weakness in it. One of the narrators is a famously known person who's weak. So we cannot say this hadith is for sure accurate. But if it is Sahih, or at least if it is Hasan, that tells us there are at least 124,000, 124 plus thousand people who are buried somewhere on this earth whose graves have not been found, intact in their graves. As for the rest of the Ummah, or the rest of the Mu'minun, even the Kafir, their bodies disintegrate. And it disintegrates rather quickly. The human body breaks down very quickly, generally speaking. Sometimes it may prolong in its disintegration, especially if a person is buried in a crypt, or like in the pyramids, they used to bury them in sarcophagi. In that case, the body will not disintegrate quickly and will remain stationary, or they have been embalmed or something like that. But the human body, generally speaking, is buried in the earth. It disintegrates very quickly based on humidity, this and that. So what goes through suffering all this? The soul itself. But to be clear about this, as long as the human body is inside the grave, the soul and the body both suffer. Once the body disintegrates, only the soul suffers the punishment. How about people who are insane? How about babies? How about people who never reach any degree of comprehension? What happens to them? What is their hashr? The scholars debate on this matter as well. They said they will be questioned, but their question is delayed till the day of judgment. Imam Ahmad said that no children will be questioned in their graves at all. Also, it has been said that the shaheed will not be questioned in his grave, because we know this, that they have already faced a fitna greater than this. This is also based on the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, in which he said that the shuhada are not tested and not questioned in their graves, because what they suffered, here's what the scholars added, because what they suffered is greater than the questioning in the grave. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So, the soul or the soul in the body, what goes through the punishment and what experiences this? We say famously, every single person should be saying this at the end of every single salah in the last sitting. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr wa min adhab jahannam wa min fitnat al-mahya wal-mamat wa min sharri fitnat al-masih ad-dajjal. This is a famous dua. Our-Rasul ﷺ taught us, and there are certain variations of this dua. And this dua is something we should all be making, because the Prophet ﷺ said, seek protection from ad-dajjal in your salah. And he also said, seek protection from adhab al-qabr in your salah. So this hadith, this dua covers both of these topics and adds two more. Oh Allah, seek refuge in you from the punishment of the grave, from the torment of the fire, from the trial of life and death, and from the evil affliction of al-Masih ad-Dajjal. The Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge with Allah from the torment of the grave, and this dua is made right before or after taslim. The scholars said, should it said before or after? The strongest opinion, you say it before saying anything else. You say this dua and this, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. You had a question? Oh, my apologies, okay. When this soul is taken out from the body, at the moment of death, what is the experience for that? Even though this is something which we are beyond that, but it's a nice topic to think about this. The soul is removed from the body. That's how we classify death. Last time we spoke about this in Islam. How we classify a person dying is very well set, and there's no debate on this matter. When a person dies is when the soul is taken out from the body. What happens to the person as the soul is removed? There are multiple hadith talking about this. The famous hadith says, the soul of a believer, when it is removed, it is as if water is flowing out from the spout of a water can, smooth and clearly. As for the disbeliever, when their soul is removed, it is as if a thorny branch is put in a cotton and then yanked. So it rips everything apart. So even when the soul is removed, the believer, things are made easy for them. And for the disbeliever, even that moment, they're punished. Nasallallahu afiyah. But all ulama said that removal of the soul from the human body is never pleasant and never easy, because the human body has become so accustomed to the soul, and the soul has become so accustomed to the body. Detaching these two or separating these two makes painful, and is painful each of them. For a believer believing man or woman, it's easy. The pain is less, or the suffering is less. But it is unnatural. It is painful for sure. The reward and punishment in the grave is something that follows after the questioning. Last time we talked about the idea of husn al-khatima, but we did not discuss su al-khatima, the evil end. Simple question to any and all of you. A person who exhibits all signs of husn al-khatima, that Allah bless them with a good end, what do you think his hashr, or her hashr will be in the grave? Punished or not punished? You tell me. Very likely not punished. I cannot say for sure, but very likely the person will not be punished, because Allah SWT gave him a good death. A death that a person whose death causes people to miss them and yearn for their return and hope to meet them in the akhirah. That person, inshallah, is safe from the punishment in the grave. And we already discussed what happens to that person. The grave is widened, it's illuminated. There are other ahadith talk about what else are the rewards in the grave. One of the rewards is that a window from Jannah is opened up, and from that the pleasant and cool, the air from the Jannah flows inside inside the grave, and makes the grave smell good and feel good for the believer until the day of judgment. What do you think happens for the disbeliever? It's safe to assume that what happens for the disbeliever, you tell me. A window from hellfire is opened up inside the grave, and a really pungent, bad smelling and very hot air keeps blowing inside the grave till the day of judgment. Excuse me. Before we talk about the reward and punishment in the grave, there's one important concept to discuss. Kafarat or expiations are of three levels. One level, the easiest is when people are alive. That's the reason why when the Sahaba in particular were known for this, when they fell into a sin, they will go and beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger of Allah, purify us, help us get away from this sin. They want to be removed from this sin and they were willing to undergo any punishment in the life of this world. Do you know why? Because what follows after that, level 2 of kafara inside the grave, is harsher and more severe. And these two, level 1 and 2, are nothing compared to what's waiting for people who escape punishment in dunya and the grave for their major sins. For them, the kafara and the hellfire is severe. So, if a person has any debt, if a person has any wrongdoing, now is the time to make tawbah. Seek forgiveness. Go say sorry to people whom you offended and whom you wronged. Now is the time to do so, because the punishment is only exasperated and made harsher once you enter the grave. And there are so unfortunate people, so many amongst humanity, they will continue to suffer from the moment they're buried till the day of judgment. And yet that will not cause a decrease in their sins this much. So now they have to go through a longer purification period in the hellfire. And then there are those unfortunate souls who disbelieved in Allah and rejected His message. They will never leave hellfire. All eternity inside it. We seek Allah's protection from such a fate. Examples of reward in the grave. What are the examples? In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ told us that people will be shown two things when they enter Jannah. When they enter the grave, two things. The first thing for a believer will be this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell the person, this is your seat in the hellfire. Had you not believed in my message, but because you're a believer, we have replaced it for you with this. And they'll be shown their space in Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, at that moment, the believer will yearn that the day of judgment arrives immediately. So that they can what? Go into their spot in Jannah. As for the disbeliever, they will be shown first their space in Jannah, and then they'll be told, this was reserved for you had you been a believer. But because you disbelieve, this is what is reserved for you. And then they'll be shown their spot in Jahannam. And at that moment, the disbeliever will hate to meet Allah Azza wa Jal. And they'll wish the Yawm al-Qiyamah will never come. One more time. All these ahadith are sahih. Many of them are mutawatir. One more time for a good reason. So there is no doubt in the hearts of people what will happen to them once they enter the graves. So beware. The time in the grave for a mu'min or a mu'minah is very short. The Prophet ﷺ said that the time when they enter the grave versus when they are resurrected on the day of judgment, they will feel as if they've been sleeping between Dhuhr and Asr. The Sahaba have been buried how long? You tell me. 14th century. Some of them 13 and a half, perhaps those who live very long. But majority of them 14th century they've been buried. Before that, the Sahaba of Musa, or even Ismail, or that of Idris, how long had they been buried? Tens of thousands of years. And Allah knows when the Yawm al-Qiyamah will come. When they wake up, it will be as if they slept between Dhuhr and Asr. Nice, comfortable, restful stupor, and you wake up fresh. As for the disbeliever, they will feel they have already spent an eternity in the grave. And when they wake up, there'll be nothing but despair for them, because now they have to go another eternity with harsher punishments. We seek Allah's protection from such a fate. So what are examples of reward in the grave? The first is widening the grave. The second is illumination in the grave. The third is good smell and cold air inside the grave. The fourth is a deep and comfortable sleep inside the grave. The fifth is that good deeds will come to the person looking like a good person. Famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that the Quran will come between the kafir and the believer and hug the believer. And the Quran will insist, I will not let him go until I make sure he enters Jannah or Jahannam. Jannah, my apologies. Yani, I will ensure that he enters Jannah. That's the only time I will leave him. So, if this, my brothers and sisters, is not an incentive enough for you to memorize the entire Quran, or at least make a point to review it regularly throughout the rest of the life, what else of motivation do you need? Hadith is sahih, by the way, no doubt about it. So those who are champions of the Quran, those who have memorized it, the entire or large sections of it, or those who keep at least reviewing it and reading it for the rest of life, whether they read it with or without translation, with or without tafsir, as long as they maintain a good schedule of reading the Quran, that Quran will come for them and will hug them and defend them and keep them safe in the life of the grave and after that. May Allah grant us that companionship of the Quran. A special clothing is given to the mu'min or mu'minah inside the grave. Yani even in this matter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not left the person alone. They will be given a clothing which is different, soft, comfortable, sweet smelling and beautiful. You may say, what's the point? He's buried inside the grave. Yes, it's a way of honoring the person. It's the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling the person, you are my chosen slave. That's why. Glad tidings of good things happening to family are given to the person. So when Shaykh Ammar got married, the first time I ever heard that hadith was from Shaykh Walid. He was, marrying Shaykh Ammar off to his daughter. He said, our scholars have told us that Rasulullah told the Sahaba that when a person is buried, a righteous person, and one of their children gets married, this good deed, so this glad tidings is given to the person in their grave. So we hope that Shaykh Ammar's father is given the glad tidings that he's getting married right now, because Shaykh Ammar's father had passed away by that time. Allah rahmhu. The gate of Jannah is, some scholars said that the gate of Jannah is shown to the person, and finally the fragrance of paradise we described already. Everything opposite to this is what people who are disbelievers or fusaq, evil Muslims, they go through this. Which is what? What are the examples of punishment in the grave that they experience? First and foremost, a bad smell coming from the hellfire. The second, excessive heat, torturous heat. Number 3, smoke. Everywhere there's smoke inside the grave. There's no illumination, there's darkness. Number 5, beating with a hammer until it turns to dust. And this is based on a famous hadith in which also when the angels wake the person up, he's asked a question. This version of the hadith says he's asked one question. Who is your Nabi? He says, I do not know. So the angels take a hammer and smack him right there. So hard that he screeches. The Prophet ﷺ said, this screeching is heard by everybody except a-thaqalain. Yani, the jinn and the ins. In different hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, I wished once to make dua that Allah will allow you to hear the screeching and the punishment of the graves. But I fear you will stop burying your dead. That's why I did not make this dua. So from these ahadith, we know that graveyards, if those that are buried in the graveyard are nothing but mu'minun, are people who are kuffar or people of fusaq, they scream ferociously, screeching at the top of the lungs night and day, till the day of judgment. Everything can hear this except the jinn and the men. And that's one of the reasons why the scholars said, and this is something that's absolutely true, you can test it. I tested it about a week ago. Go to any graveyard. You will barely hear a squirrel, or barely hear insect, or even a bird. Graveyards are so peaceful. And yet they're extremely horrendous. The reason they're so peaceful, because the animals scatter. Constant screeching and hurtful things that they hear, which we cannot hear. And for that we seek Allah's refuge and we thank Him. We do not want to hear what happens inside the grave. Because the Prophet ﷺ said what? You will not bury your dead if you were to hear the screeching. Excuse me. Can anyone give me an idea of what could be the causes of punishment in the grave? You can start mentioning sins. Everyone knows what the sins, everyone recognizes them. They are all reasons for punishment. Tell me.
Not doing purification after you go to the bathroom.
Excellent. We're going to come to that hadith, inshallah. So I'm going to come back to you, inshallah, for that one. But that's a very good point. This hadith that's talking about is specifically talking about something which appears to be small, but it is a reason for punishment in the grave. What else? We're going to come to that, inshallah. Start with the big ones.
Abandonment of prayer.
Good. Tarkus salah. Abandoning salah is one of the major causes for mu'minun or fusaq, more specifically, evil Muslims to be punished in the grave. We seek Allah's protection from some jahala or some degree of ghafla, that people abandon prayer altogether. What else do you think? Shirk, bid'ah. Pardon me? I'm sorry about that. Hypocrisy, nifaq, for sure. Kufr of any kind, major sins, all of them lead to people suffering the grave. Remember, the grave is second level of kafara. In other words, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is also, no exaggeration, a mercy from Allah. He wants you to go through expiation in the grave. So at least on the day of judgment, when you face him, you're free from sin. You've suffered in the grave. I'm not about you, I should. The evil Muslim has suffered in the grave so that they have nothing left except a handful of good deeds. As for their platter of bad deeds, it's completely empty because they've been wiped out and all the sins they've been punished for in the grave itself. Even the punishment in the grave ultimately is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for evil Muslims. As for kuffar, there's no rahmah there, obviously. What else do you think? Famous example that the brother mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ came to this grave and he told his Sahaba, there were two graves over there. These two are being punished and not for something significant. One of them used to not clean himself after urination. And the second of them used to do what? Namima, used to carry tales, gossip. Now, just to be clear about this hadith is saying that they two are being punished for something which you don't consider to be significant, but they are significant in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means what? When you go to the bathroom, teach your children to be adamant in cleaning themselves properly. And obviously it's understood from Muslim and Mu'minah that they clean themselves properly after using the bathroom. If urination is a cause for this, obviously defecation is a bigger issue. So there should be hygiene maintained in this matter. It is something that has direct effect of your time in the grave. The second thing is gossiping, something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates immensely. It only spreads fasad in the society. Nothing else, right? Because what you're starting with is something foul. How can it end up after passing 5 different people with something good? It will only ferment. It will only become worse with time. Therefore, these two things cause a person to be punished in the grave. Another aspect of the grave is something unique. The scholars said, any single hadith that talks about punishment in the grave, about an action, that action is a major sin. So they said, if an action causes a had to be prescribed for that person, it's a major sin. What is had? A prescribed punishment in Sharia. Removal of hands or the feet, or person to be receiving capital punishment. These are hudud. If anyone is guilty of any such crime that has a prescribed punishment, that's a major sin. If a hadith mentions an action and is attached with the punishment in the grave, that also is a major sin. Like namima, like not cleaning themselves after using the bathroom. So on and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells about this, النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا ويوم تقوم الساعة أدخلوا آل فرعون أشد العذاب. The fire, they're exposed to it morning and afternoon. And on the day when the hour will be established, it will be said to the angels, cause Fir'aun and his people to enter the severest torment. So we know already from this that Fir'aun and his army and the people who supported him, Qarun and to others ministers, they're all till this day suffering in their graves. Every single day they're exposed to the fire of the hellfire, which obviously burns them and causes them extreme pain and suffering. And is that the end of their punishment? No. What's waiting for them is the worst. On the day of judgment, they'll be thrown in the depths of the hellfire. Ashad al-adhab. Excuse me. Does the punishment of the grave continue until the day of judgment? It's a very good point. A person known to be fasiq or kafir, they're buried. For kafir, for sure, we know that. This is question for those who are evil Muslims. A person who is known to be a cheat, a person who died cursing other people, a person who never used to pray, one of the brothers gave the example, never gave zakah, never made any effort to go for hajj, was known to be someone who always caused harm to people, lied frequently, cheated people. But he died upon Islam, whatever little Islam he had. What is his hashar? According to Imam Ibn Qayyim, there are two types. Certain types will continue until the day of judgment, for example, for the disbeliever. This will continue until they are resurrected. The second is for people who are evil Muslims. If a person is in debt, as long as their debt remains, they'll be punished. So when the debt is removed from them, the punishment stops from them. That's one of the reasons why we always say, and why the family of the deceased says what? Please tell me, does my father, does my mother, does my sister, does my brother, does my husband, does my wife, did he or she have any debt upon any of you? Please tell me now. So before they're buried, let me pay it off for you. Why? Because they'll keep suffering inside their grave until the debt is paid off. Famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which a Sahabi passed away and he asked, does this man die with any debt? The Sahaba said, we do not know, Ya Rasulullah. But he waited. He was about to start Salat al-Janazah on the person. Then he repeated the question, did this man die with any debt? One of the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, he had 3 dirham. So he said famously, You guys pray on your sahab, on your companion. He refused to do what? Li salatul janaza for one of his own companions. Abu Qatada said, Ya Rasulullah, I will pay off his debt. So the Prophet ﷺ started praying janazah on him. Next day he met Abu Qatada. Did you pay off the debt? He said, not yet. He said, okay, pay it off quickly. The next day he met Abu Qatada. Did you pay off the debt? He said, yes, Ya Rasulullah. He said, thankfully today your companion has eased his suffering. The man who was buried was a Sahabi of Ar-Rasul ﷺ, not known for any sins or anything like that. He died with 3 dirham. He was made to suffer in his grave for 2 days until Abu Qatada paid off his debt. Do you understand how severe this is? In modern times, every Muslimah has a credit card. A credit card, usually you pay it one cycle, a cycle of 30 days. The scholars of modern times debated this issue. They said, what happens in this case? Because should we pay off the debt of the person immediately? Many times we don't even know the password of the person. Sometimes, worst thing possible, the husband is hiding another account from the wife. The wife is hiding another account from the husband. The parents do not know the children had multiple accounts. Or the children did not know how many accounts the parents had because the parents made no effort to inform the children about where the money is. They died with debt. Or they died with something that they had to return to somebody. Someone gave them amana. Hold on to my jewelry for a few years, I'll take it back from you. They died. The person is living overseas. That is a debt that needs to be paid off. Do you understand? Islamic finances has a very deep connection with Qabr. You need to make sure that your debts have been taken care of before you're buried. And for that, at least do this. I strongly advise this. And something I need to implement as well. At least one place on this earth, you should write by hand, not on a computer, by hand on a piece of paper, what accounts you have, and whom you owe money to, and who has given you something to keep on their behalf. At least keep these things on that piece of paper, so that if Allah causes you to die immediately or suddenly, at least someone can pull out the piece of paper and see and take precautions for you. All your life you made istighfar. All your life you made tawbah. You prayed 5 times. Fasting day and night. Making hajj multiple times. Umrah. Everyone loves you, admires you. You go inside your grave and your family delays paying your debt off. That can be a reason for the person to be suffering in their grave. Can you imagine that? So make sure that there's nothing on your record, especially your financial record, that has not been taken care of. Or at least make sure someone will know about it immediately upon your death. Your wife, your children, somebody like that. You should not be leaving anything hidden. That could be a big problem. And finally, smart thing. As a person who is about to die and they have a secret bank account, why would you not want your family to benefit from it? Many times banks refuse to open or give anything inside the account to anybody else, including close family members. $200,000 gone because a person died suddenly. That incident happened, by the way. This guy who was in charge of cryptocurrency, he had cryptocurrency close to $180 million on his hard drive. This incident happened 3 years ago. I don't know whether you guys heard about this. Man went to a vacation. American guy went to India, of all the places. I'm from India. Why would he go to India? But he went to vacation in India. He died over there. Got sick, was a unique disease over there, died over there. With him, nobody on earth knew the password for that hard drive. His wife had the hard drive. She does not know the password. It's a 16-bit encryption. They said it will take $2 million just to encrypt the password, and we cannot guarantee that the password will still be found. $180 million of people's wealth died with him in their hard drive. Cryptocurrency. Why? Because this man did not write the password anywhere. I understand he would not write the password anywhere, but why put $180 million worth of wealth inside one hard drive? Be mindful of this, brothers and sisters, inshallah. What can a person do to save themselves from the punishment in the grave? Obviously, you make the dua that we talked about. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr, wa min adhab jahannam, wa min fitnat al-mahya wal-mamat, wa min sharri fitnat al-masih al-dajjal. That's one. Obviously, the second thing is to read and memorize Surah Al-Mulk. This is something we should pay attention to. Surah Al-Mulk is the first surah of the 29th juz. Everyone knows about this. Tabarakalladhi biyadihil mulk. That's Surah Al-Mulk. That is surah in a famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said, every single person who reads this surah every single day, he will not be harmed inside his grave. May Allah give us the tawfiq for that. Number 2 is tawheed, a person who is muwahid and prays and is determined towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remains upon that, that person inshallah will never experience punishment in the grave. Number 3, good deeds in general are a shield from that. Every single sadaqah, every single salah, every single sajda, every single time you say salam, every single time you smile at the face of your brother, every single time you played with a child, whether you're or somebody else's, inshallah, all of them will come protection for you from the punishment of the grave. Spending a night in the ribat, someone who's defending in the Muslim borders, if he dies in that state, he or she, inshallah, that person is safe from punishment of the grave. Dying as a shaheed, whether trying to defend the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your own life, your wealth, or the life of a stranger, even the wealth of a stranger, that is sufficient protection from the punishment of the grave. Imagine you see somebody drowning, it happened a long time. You see a child who fell down in the river, you jump into it, you save the child, but the river carried it away. That person, inshallah, will be safe from punishment of the grave because he saved another person's life. Even if that person died, but you try to save their life, that in itself is a cause for you to be classified as a shaheed or a shaheeda. And that person, inshallah, is safe from that. Dying on the night or the day of Friday. We learn from this is a sign of what? Husnul Khatima. And inshallah, that is a sign that a person will be safe from the harm of the grave. One final thing, we'll end with this, inshallah. We talked about the idea of the body and the soul. We also discussed that after some time, the body disintegrates, the soul remains. But then we talked about after that the idea that the ruh is removed from the body. So where does it, and when does it go back? Let's discuss this idea and we'll end with this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designed this program. Malik al-Maut, the angel of death, we do not know whether that's a title for a group of angels or one guy. And it could be one angel who can do this multiple times. Many times, 2,000 people die instantly in a bomb blast. Or a large boat capsizes, and in a matter of 20 minutes, 2,000 people drown. This guy does not falter even for a second. He goes and collects everybody's soul. So whether it's one angel or group of angels, we do not know. Very likely it's one angel. And the name given for him is Malak al-Maut, the angel of death. His job is one thing, remove the soul. With him, always there is a party of angels, all the time, who come with him. This party of angels are the actual keepers of the soul. Remember the hadith we talked about last time when we talked about death? When the man who killed 99 people, as he was on the road to Rahmah as well as Tawbah, he died on the road and the angels started debating with each other. Who are these angels? The angels who come behind the angel of death. Angel of death take the soul out and hands it to them. That's his job. So for this guy who killed 99 people and then he made Tawbah, they started debating amongst themselves. Should he go to Jannah and Jahannam? I mean, for instance, the hadith says that he ended up in Jannah because the angels of death, the angels of death, or the angels who came with the angel of death, they won the debate that he was someone who was forgiven. They take the soul. What happens to the soul? So many opinions, listens. Muslim scholars agree the soul will be returned to the body on the day of judgment. That's when resurrection happens. That's when the body and this body will be reconstituted and the soul made to enter that. Yani, on the day of judgment, people, the ruh and the jism together will face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just the ruh, not just the jism. Together, like we are right now. The second opinion is that souls go around the grave. They're not inside the grave, but they keep roaming around that. That's the second opinion. The third opinion, souls of believers are outside the gates of Jannah. Being outside the gate of Jannah is pretty fantastic. Because you can hear, see, smell, and feel all the things going outside Jannah. The gates of Jannah are always open. Except on Day of Judgment when they will be closed because, famously, the Prophet ﷺ will go and knock on it and ask for that to be done. Actually, I should not say they're always open, my apologies. They're always closed, except they're open in Ramadan when the gates of Jannah are opened at that time. So, some scholars said that the souls of the believers are outside the gates of Jannah, enjoying and having a good time. Number four, the souls of believers roam freely on earth. As for disbelievers, they're tied down to the grave. And this could be a reason why so many cultures have the idea of ghosts and spirits roaming around without any guidance, without any direction. because they all have the same genesis of information. They must have heard this from their scriptures and then they corrupted their scriptures. Alhamdulillah, in our scripture, in the Quran and the Sunnah, is still intact. Number 5, souls of believers are at top of the 7th heaven. As for disbelievers, they're with Iblis. I don't know where this opinion came, that disbelievers are with Iblis. But it is something that some scholars have opined. Number 6, souls return to the place before they were placed in their bodies. Number 7, souls of shuhada are in Jannah, the rest are in the grave, according to Imam Ibn Abdul Barr. And finally, the souls are at the grave for 7 days. After that, they are going towards Jannah. This is the opinion of Imam Mujahid ibn Jabr, Imam or student of Ibn Abbas. So all of these opinions are based on different ahadith, and some of these ahadith are explicit, majority of them are not explicit. Therefore, there's disagreement on this matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Shaykh Muhammad al-Jibani in his book, he mentioned about this. He said the strongest opinion is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes the souls of a believer to be taken to Jannah, and they experience something over there that delights them and rewards them and makes them yearn for Jannah. Then the soul is brought back and put inside the grave. And we know this from multiple different ahadith we talk about. The windows opened up, the cold air blows, they feel as if they've been comforted, clothes are given to them, the Quran comes to them, good deeds come to them, so on and so forth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, that is the correct opinion in this matter. Finally, souls of the disbelievers, they're gathered in a place on this earth and gates of heaven will never be open to them. That's one opinion. The second hadith in the Nasai says, souls will attempt to go to heaven but will be thrashed back onto earth. So different hadith says the angels take the soul and try to take it up, but they're blocked. Once they realize that the soul cannot go up, they throw it down. It comes crashing down back into the grave of the disbeliever, where it crashes in great amount of pain. And finally, where are they stored in this earth? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Now, I understand the fact that, as I said before, there are multiple ahadith talking about the rewards as well as the punishment in the grave. But the exact nature of ar-ruh is something we're still unclear about. Famously, because the Prophet ﷺ has said that Allah SWT said in the Quran what? Ar-ruh is something that we know very little about. And this is something Allah SWT knows a lot about. And there is great reason why we have so little information about our own ruh, as opposed to everything else. Because ar-ruh is a concept that we cannot fully comprehend. So Allah SWT did not spend time and effort explaining something that is beyond our capacity. And that is the case for many different things. Certain punishments in Jahannam, certain rewards in Jannah are beyond comprehension, so they have not been explained. And so when it comes to how the ruh behaves after death is something we are unclear about. However, what we are clear about and about which we should have no doubt, there is punishment in the grave and there are plenty different ways to avoid it. We discussed a lot of them today, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those people who are able to implement them as long as we are alive. As when we enter a grave, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us our time in the grave as short as between Dhuhr and Asr. And when we meet Him, He's happy with us and we're happy meeting Him. Are there any questions, brothers and sisters, before we end tonight? Yes?
I have two questions. So the first one is, for the believers, does Munkar and Nakir, do they appear beautiful? Or
No, they are still horrific.
Okay. And then the second question is just the concept of barzakh. Like, for the Muslims, will they be sleeping in the grave until the day of judgment, or are they in the barzakh? Is that like one of the opinions?
Oh, barzakh, I should have mentioned. The word barzakh means a barrier in general. Okay. Why is it a barrier? It's a barrier between the life of the akhirah and the life of this world. Because the life of the grave is technically still the life of al-ard, the life of this world. And barzakh is basically a barrier between these two things. But the life of al-barzakh is basically the life of al-qabr. It's a life about which we have information that we've described, but it's a life that is completely hidden to us. The barrier part is also that we have no way to confirm it. So, if I go ahead and open the grave of somebody today who was buried yesterday, would I see anything inside it? No, you'll see a dead body. Would you see the punishment being given to that person? No. That is part and parcel of the life of this barzakh. Is he being suffered? Yes. Okay, someone who's really muttaqi, someone who's waliullah. Let's say 70 days after they were buried, we go open their grave. Would the grave be wide and huge? There will still be 6 by 3 feet. It's wide and huge for them, not for you. That is the life of al-barzakh. Its rules, its explanation, its appearance, its feeling, completely independent from this world. The body and the ruh, both will feel it, but we, as long as we're living, cannot see it and cannot feel it. Any other questions, brothers and sisters? I'm surprised. I thought you will have so many questions about this. I have so many questions about this topic, and I'm speaking about it. Because like I said, this topic deals with ar-ruh, and about ar-ruh we're not clear. But yes, go ahead, sister.
You mentioned the Quran and how it will stay with you great until when you're done. That it's like the obvious question, but that requires you to act upon it, like not just memorize it, but follow it.
I'm glad that you asked the question. The idea of companionship of the Quran, how do you define that? Companionship of the Quran is all the things that we know. If you do not know the Arabic language, reading with translation. Even if you do not know the Arabic language, reading it. Tilawa by itself, the Quran is ibadah. In itself, inherently you get reward just for reading it. A single haraka is what 10 rewards, we know this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. If you can become a better companion to the Quran, do so. How can you do so? It's like being a friend with any other human being. When you start becoming friend with somebody, you first know their name, your first and last name. Then you end up learning where they live because you go visit them at home, right? Then you start learning about their likes and dislikes. Then as you spend more and more time with them, you start learning about their character, the good things and some faults in them. Then you start learning about their friends and their family members. Then you might start learning about their extended family members. Then you might learn about something about their father's life. Then you might learn something about their grandfather's life. Then you might learn something about their grade in the 6th grade. Or the marks in 6th grade. In other words, the more time you spend with a close friend, the more you learn about them. The Quran is exactly like that. The more time you have with the Quran, the more you learn about it. Not just how to recite it properly. You may end up memorizing large sections of it or all of it. The more time you spend in the Quran, the more you'll understand its tafsir, its correct interpretation, even in the English language. And if you can learn the Arabic language, do so. Why would you not want to be a friend of the Quran? Who could be a better friend of the Quran than the one who speaks the language of the Quran, which is the Arabic language? So if you can do so, do so. And obviously a person, the more friendship he gains with the Quran will be a better friend to that person in the life of Qabr and after that. That in itself should be a reason for people to memorize the Quran, learn the Quran, try to see its explanation in the Arabic language or in the English language, wherever they're comfortable, or any other language for that matter. But relationship with the Quran is a guarantee of success in the life of this world and the next. And staying away from the Quran is a guarantee for debasement. We seek Allah's protection from that. If there are no further questions, we're going to end here. Oh, go ahead. Sorry about that.
One other thing, are there several hadith that talk about the companionship in the grave? Like your good deeds turn into a companion in the grave?
There's more than one. There's a famous hadith about sadaqah as well. That a person will come in the grave, and that person will be the sadaqah of that person. Sadaqah and zakah, both obviously. A person who gives sadaqah but does not give zakah, he has no success. Zakah is the pillar of Islam. But obviously we talk about giving any kinds of obligatory and voluntary sadaqah will be included. There are 1 or 2 other hadith about other good deeds as well. I don't remember exactly which good deed they're connected to. Yes?
I heard a hadith where, like, it's about like the punishment coming from different sides of your body, and like it might come up from on top of your head, and your prayer stands up for you. Is that authentic? You know about that hadith at all?
I know of the ayah in the Quran in which Iblis says, or Shaitan says, I will come to them from the front and the back, and from the right and from the left. And the scholars said he did not mention from the top and the bottom. Do you know why? It's a very lengthy explanation. They said, because if you can see your enemy from the front and the back, you can defend yourself. Iblis is challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the believers. I will come to you from the front. You will see me coming and you'll still not be able to defend yourself. As from the top and bottom, obviously come from there. You will not even see me coming. That's why. As for the hadith you're talking about, I do not know about that one. Any other questions? طيب, we're going to end with this. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.